Nintendo dropped a ton of huge announcements in the latest Nintendo Direct, and among them was a trailer of a new Wii U game from Monolith Soft. But we have no idea what to call it since it hasn't publicly been given a name yet. But we're not going to let that tiny detail stop us from starting up the old analysis machine and seeing what secrets the trailer might be hiding. But to do so, we've again enlisted the help of GameXplain's resident Monolith Soft expert, Derek Bittner, who uncovered many of the details you're about to see. And with that, let's get started. So first things first, what in the hell is it? Well, if you played any of Monolith Soft's recent Xenoblade Chronicles, then you might have noticed that it looks extremely similar in many ways. And by many ways, I really mean almost every way, as the general look and feel of the game is nearly identical. Even the area shown in the trailer's first scene looks more than a little similar to the Bionis' Leg region of Xenoblade Chronicles. Then there's the fact that the HUD looks like it shares nearly the exact same layout. But the clincher is the X shown at the end of the trailer, which looks very similar to the X in the Xenoblade Chronicles logo. So at the very least, we're looking at the spiritual successor to Xenoblade Chronicles, if not a sequel that takes place in the same universe. Lending credence to the sequel theory is the fact that the mysterious character that appears late in the trailer looks suspiciously similar to Shulk, who was the main character in Xenoblade Chronicles, but more on him in a second. Now let's take a look at that X again. Although it's very similar to the one in Xenoblade's logo, as mentioned, the color has been changed from silver to bright red, which appears to be the same red used in the logo for Monolith Soft's older but unrelated game, Xenogears. Although it could just be a coincidence, or maybe it suggests a few elements might just return from that game. We can already see hints of this with the more prevalent inclusion of mechs, which had a minimal role in Xenoblade, but were featured more prominently in Xenogears. As you can see, they actually look pretty similar, and it even includes a familiar cockpit view. Now this too could just be a coincidence, or maybe hints at even more throwbacks to Monolith Soft's previous games. But let's take a quick look at the mech that does appear in Xenoblade Chronicles for a second. It looks considerably less advanced than the one shown in the trailer, and that leads us to believe that if the game does in fact take place in the same universe, it might actually be in the future, but by how much we're not sure. It might also explain why the mechs appear to be called dolls, as you can see by the title above the fuel gauge. We're going to try and avoid spoiling too much, but we think that name might be a reference to the ending of Xenoblade Chronicles and the fact that the mechs are essentially lifeless machines, aka dolls. Now assuming we're right about any of this, and if it does take place in the future, then that Shulk looking guy might actually be Shulk, only a few years older. Or maybe he's a future relative like his son or grandson or something. Okay, that's enough about the setting, let's talk about the gameplay. As we mentioned before, the HUD is extremely similar to the one in Xenoblade, and that includes the blue information boxes in the top left, which provide crucial information about the characters in your party. And since there are 3 of them at points, this suggests that your party will again max out at 3 characters. But there are also scenes in the trailer that displays only a single character box, which might suggest that these scenes take place earlier in the game, before you team up with others, or maybe it's an indicator that you'll separate from the rest of your party at some point. Though we do have one more theory. The game might actually support fully cooperative online play, and we think this might be the case for a few reasons. For one, it would explain the varying amount of characters. You can of course play by yourself or have up to 2 friends join you. Secondly, if we look at the character boxes again, we can see they're all named player followed by a number, such as player 1 or player 2, suggesting their placeholder names were actual usernames. Although it is possible that the game is not online and those names are simply concealing the characters' actual names for now. Plus, if we take a look at this scene, the 2 additional party members do seem strangely coordinated, coming to a stop at the exact same time immediately after the main character, which suggests they're being controlled by the computer. But then there's this clip, which shows one of your party members battling an enemy in the far distance, much farther than your party members ever strayed in Xenoblade Chronicles. Either their range is greatly expanded, or that is actually an online teammate who ventured off on his own. And of course, we can explain all of these discrepancies by the fact that if you're not playing online, maybe your teammates are simply controlled by the computer instead. But there is one more thing we notice that basically confirms online play. The blue box in the bottom left corner displays what appears to be 3 different usernames with some Japanese text beneath each one. After having a resident Japanese speaker translate for us, we discovered it's a chat window where the 3 players exchange simple pleasantries before commenting on the size of the beast. So this basically confirms that you'll be able to communicate with your teammates in real time, and we're guessing you'll be using a virtual keyboard on the gamepad to do so. So now that we're pretty sure you can fight alongside your friends, let's take a look at how the battle system itself might work. If we take a look at the bottom of the HUD, we can see that the action commands available in battle look extremely similar to Xenoblade Chronicles again. So if it's anything like that game, which it appears to be, that means that characters will attack automatically, allowing you to focus on their positioning and when to use special abilities. In fact, you can see how the abilities available to you changes depending on your position. However, this time it appears you'll be able to target different parts of the enemy. Watch as the ready kill changes position on this giant lizard, or how the targeted location changes automatically after destroying the sack on these spider-like creatures. Conversely, it appears your character can now suffer from attacks beyond just losing health, as shown here when he gets launched into the air. It also appears they can switch weapons during combat, as the character here changes from a sword to a gun, which should allow for even more strategy in regards to your positioning and distance from the enemy. If anything, the battles seem far more dynamic than before, and nothing showcases this better than the fact that the mechs or dolls can get in on the action too. Speaking of which, there's a few things about the dolls we wanted to point out. For one, it appears that you'll only be able to use them for a limited time, as indicated by the fuel gauge. In fact, if we zoom in, you can even see it drop in this clip. This is actually different than how it worked in Xenogears, where your fuel gauge dropped different amounts depending on the actions you performed. Now, it's also pretty clear that the dolls will be useful for fast travel, and it appears that as part of that, they'll be able to transform into a land vehicle, though we're not entirely sure what benefit this serves. But it does appear they'll sometimes automatically transform back into their mech form, such as when they reach a body of water. Finally, as we pointed out before, there does appear to be a view from the cockpit, but we're guessing this is a cutscene and not available during actual gameplay due to the lack of the usual HUD. Okay, we're just about done here, but as usual, there's a few final details we want to point out. First, as you've probably noticed by now, the scale of the game is huge, and far grander than that of Xenoblade Chronicles. The enemies are bigger, and the environments are gigantic. We can only imagine as to the scope of the story. Secondly, if you look above the radar, you'll find a clock, suggesting a real-time day and night system. And right next to that appears to be a display of the current weather conditions, meaning that too is likely to change in real time. Pretty nifty. And with that, we're done uncovering everything we could dig up on Monolith Soft's latest game. As usual, let us know if we missed anything by posting in the comments. Thanks for watching, and make sure to stay tuned to GameXplain.com for more on this game and other things gaming too.